I am David, 34 years old. 5 years of working 70-hour weeks, sacrificing my youth, and pouring every single ounce of my corporate salary into a deeply personal dream, all stolen in a single afternoon by my own brother. While I was sitting in my downtown office finalizing a massive commercial real estate deal, my parents and my brother were popping expensive champagne in the living room of my secret lake house. My brother actually stood on my brand new, custom-finished hardwood floors, raised a crystal glass to our extended relatives, and said with a completely straight face, "We deserve this upgrade. After years of struggling while others had it easy, it is our time." They laughed. They cheered. They claimed my property as their own. But there was one massive, life-ruining detail they did not know. That house was not just a vacation home. It was the centerpiece of a 50-acre corporate development project, and they were trespassing on multi-million-dollar commercial territory. And now, they are facing a lawsuit they can never, ever win. Before I tell you exactly how I tore down their entitlement and burned their delusions to the ground, hit that like button if you believe in absolute justice. And let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Now, let us go back to the exact moment the security alert buzzed in my pocket and changed my life forever. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October. The kind of crisp, brilliant day where the autumn sunlight hits the glass of the high-rises just right, making the whole city look like it is coated in gold. I was sitting at my mahogany desk on the 42nd floor of my firm's headquarters. The air conditioning was humming quietly in the background. I had just received a major promotion to project director the week prior, a title that came with a heavy equity stake and a workload that would break most people. I was in the middle of reviewing a quarterly financial report, tracking the zoning permits for our latest acquisition, when my phone vibrated violently against the polished wood of my desk. I ignored it at first. I am a man who lives and dies by his schedule, and my focus was entirely on the numbers in front of me. But then it buzzed again, and again. 3 rapid, aggressive vibrations that signaled a high-priority alert. I glanced down, expecting an emergency email from my lawyer regarding an upcoming contract negotiation or a frantic message from a junior analyst. Instead, the screen displayed a notification from the state-of-the-art security system I had personally installed exactly 48 hours prior at the lake house property. Motion detected in the primary living sector. Multiple heat signatures identified. My brow furrowed into a deep knot of confusion. The contractors had completely finished their work. The professional cleaning crew had left yesterday afternoon, handing the master keys directly to me. I had personally locked the reinforced doors and armed the perimeter. Nobody had the access codes to that gate except me. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen for a fraction of a second, before tapping the notification. The video feed buffered, a spinning white circle on a black background, before the high-definition, full-color feed flooded my screen. My blood turned to absolute ice. The air in my lungs simply vanished. Balloons. Large, obnoxious, metallic gold balloons reading "Welcome Home" were bobbing gently against the vaulted cedar ceiling I had spent months agonizing over with my architectural team. Below those balloons, a crowd of people milled about my sanctuary. I zoomed in, my fingers shaking just slightly against the cold glass of the screen. I recognized the back of a head. I recognized a jacket. And then he turned around. It was Liam. My older brother, Liam. He was wearing a crisp, unnecessarily expensive polo shirt, holding a crystal champagne flute. My crystal. From the sealed boxes I had not even unpacked yet. Beside him stood his wife, Sarah. She was leaning against my custom marble kitchen island. A smug, satisfied smile plastered across her face as she sliced into a massive sheet cake. The cake literally had the words, "The Bennett Family Estate," written on it in thick chocolate frosting. The audio feed kicked in a second later. The sound of my family's laughter, loud and completely unbothered, echoed off the walls of the home I had built specifically to escape their toxic shadow. I sat paralyzed in my ergonomic office chair, watching this surreal nightmare unfold in real time. My mother, Martha, walked into the frame. She patted Liam on the back, her face glowing with a profound pride she had never, not once in my entire 34 years of existence, directed at me. My father, Arthur, was holding a digital camera, taking pictures of the stone fireplace as if he were a proud patriarch documenting his legacy. "To our perfect new home," Liam announced, his voice booming through the tiny speaker of my phone with sickening clarity. "It is about time our luck turned around. No more cramped apartments. No more struggling. This is our fresh start." I gripped the edge of my desk so hard the wood groaned in protest. My knuckles turned completely white, the tendons in my hands aching from the pressure. Luck. He actually called it luck. He did not see the 5 years of grueling overtime. He did not see the canceled dates, the sleepless nights, the holidays I spent eating stale takeout alone at my desk to secure my corporate standing. He did not see the relentless discipline required to amass the capital for this exact property. He saw a beautiful, expensive house, and his immediate, unfiltered instinct was to simply decide it belonged to him. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone against the wall. When you work in high-stakes commercial real estate, when you navigate rooms full of cutthroat investors and aggressive legal teams, you learn very quickly that emotion is your biggest liability. Anger makes you sloppy. You do not get mad. You get leverage. You secure your assets. I closed the security app, letting it run in the background to record every single second of their intrusion. I opened the heavy bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the thick manila folder I had brought from the bank that morning. It contained the original deed, the certified wire transfer receipts, the property tax documents, and the commercial zoning maps. My name was the only one on every single page. I shoved the folder into my leather briefcase, snapped the brass locks shut, and stood up. I straightened my tie. I walked out of my private office. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Elena, looked up from her monitors as I marched past her desk. "Elena, cancel my afternoon meetings," I said, my voice completely devoid of inflection. "Reschedule the zoning board call for tomorrow morning. I have a severe pest control issue at a private property that requires my immediate, physical presence." The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like an eternity suspended in time. Every ding of the passing floors echoed like the ticking of a bomb waiting to detonate in my chest. I reached my designated parking spot, threw the briefcase into the passenger seat of my car, and gripped the steering wheel. I was about to put the car in drive when a memory hit me. A memory so vivid and painful it knocked the breath entirely from my lungs. A brutal reminder of exactly why I could not and would not show these people a single ounce of mercy today. The drive from my downtown corporate headquarters to the Willowbrook property takes exactly 19 minutes. I know this specific metric because I timed it the day I signed the final closing papers. I wanted to know precisely how long it would take me to transition from the aggressive chaos of the city into my private, untouchable haven. Today, however, those 19 minutes felt like a harrowing journey backward through every single betrayal I had ever swallowed for the sake of family peace. Growing up in the Bennett household, the dynamic was established early and enforced brutally. Liam was the golden child, the radiant sun, and the rest of us were just insignificant planets forced to orbit his perceived brilliance. If Liam managed to get a B on a high school history test, my parents threw a celebratory dinner. If I brought home a flawless report card with straight A's, I was quietly told to put it away and not to brag, because it might make my brother feel inadequate about his own struggles. I learned very early on that my assigned role in the family was to be invisible, silent, and compliant, right up until the exact moment Liam needed something fixed, paid for, or covered up. The most defining moment of my life, the trauma that forged the impenetrable armor I wear today, happened when I was 20 years old. I had been working 3 different jobs since I was 16 years old to build my college fund. I flipped burgers in a greasy kitchen until midnight, mowed lawns in the sweltering summer heat, and did basic bookkeeping for local small businesses on the weekends. I saved every single penny, denying myself basic teenage experiences. I had over $30,000 sitting in a joint savings account at the local credit union, an account my mother was still technically a signer on from when I had opened it as a minor. Liam, meanwhile, had predictably dropped out of his second attempt at college to start a custom apparel business. He convinced my parents it was the next massive industry disruptor. He maxed out both of their credit cards, leased a commercial warehouse he absolutely could not afford, and within 8 miserable months, he was facing total bankruptcy and a massive lawsuit from unpaid suppliers. I will never forget walking into the bank branch on a rainy Tuesday to withdraw my tuition money for my junior year of university. The teller, a kind older woman named Mrs. Higgins, looked at her computer screen, frowned, and then looked at me with a deep, horrific pity in her eyes. She softly informed me that the account balance was 0. My mother had walked into the branch 2 days prior and legally drained the entire $30,000. I drove home in a state of blinding, suffocating panic. When I kicked the front door open and confronted them in the kitchen, my mother did not even have the decency to look guilty. She was calmly stirring a pot of chicken soup on the stove. Without breaking eye contact, she told me that family helps family. She stated that Liam was in desperate, life-ruining trouble, and since I was the smart one, I could easily figure out how to get student loans to cover my education. My father chimed in from the dining table, his voice dripping with condescension, telling me that I was being incredibly selfish for caring about a college fund when my brother's entire future and freedom were on the line. They treated my life savings like it was their emergency fund. I packed my bags and moved out that exact night. I took out crushing, high-interest student loans to finish my degree. I survived on cheap ramen noodles, tap water, and pure, unadulterated spite. A few years later, when I finally landed a high-paying corporate job and started making real money, I decided to treat myself. I bought a vintage Porsche. It was a rusted wreck when I bought it, but I spent countless weekends in a rented garage restoring the engine and the bodywork with my own 2 hands. It was my pride and joy, a tangible, roaring symbol that I had survived their sabotage and made it entirely on my own. Then came the year Liam's wife, Sarah, demanded a massive down payment for a house in an upscale gated community. My parents, having completely drained their 401k retirement accounts to bail Liam out of his previous failures, had absolutely nothing left to give. So, they showed up unannounced at my small city apartment. They sat on my cheap, uncomfortable couch and formally demanded that I sell the Porsche to help Liam secure his mortgage. When I laughed directly in their faces, my father stood up, pointed a trembling finger at my chest, and told me I was a disgrace to the family name. I did not sell the car for them. Instead, a year later, I sold the Porsche to fund my very first major real estate investment, vowing to myself that I would multiply my wealth until I built a fortress so high they could never reach me again. And I did exactly that. I climbed the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. I became a major player in a firm that dominates the state's commercial real estate market. I bought the lake house property in absolute secrecy because I knew, with terrifying certainty, that if they ever smelled money, they would come circling like starved vultures looking for a handout. I gripped the steering wheel as I turned off the main highway and onto Willowbrook Lane. I had kept my life entirely separate from them for years. I showed up to the mandatory Thanksgiving dinners wearing plain, inexpensive clothes, driving a rented economy sedan, intentionally projecting the image of a mid-level office drone barely scraping by. I played the part to maintain the fragile peace. But as I pulled up to the property line of my estate, that fragile peace evaporated into the cold autumn air. There were 6 different cars parked haphazardly across my pristine, freshly seeded front lawn. Not the wide gravel driveway, the actual lawn. Deep, muddy tire tracks violently gouged the soft earth I had just paid a premium landscaping crew thousands of dollars to perfect. Liam's oversized, lifted truck was parked aggressively right by the front door, crushing a bed of newly planted hydrangeas. I did not pull into the driveway. I parked my car horizontally across the main gate entrance, effectively barricading them all inside the property. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out my phone, and dialed the local precinct. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. "Dispatch, this is David Bennett," I said, my voice dangerously calm and devoid of any hesitation. "I am the legal owner of the property located at 42 Willowbrook Lane. I have a break-in in progress. There are multiple hostile trespassers currently occupying my residence. I am physically on the premises. The situation is escalating, and I need sworn officers here immediately. I hung up the phone. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up my heavy leather briefcase. I stepped out of the car. The familiar, comforting scent of the lake water hit my nose, but it was immediately ruined by the smell of a cheap barbecue grill being fired up on my custom cedar deck. They were cooking meat on my deck. The storm was not just coming. I was bringing it directly to their front door, and I was going to make sure it washed away every single delusion they held about me. I stood perfectly still at the edge of the driveway, the cold wind whipping at my trench coat, waiting until I saw the flashing blue and red lights of the police cruisers turning down the narrow lane. 2 patrol cars pulled up rapidly, their tires crunching loudly against the gravel. Officer Jenkins, a veteran cop with graying hair whom I had actually spoken to at length a week prior when establishing the neighborhood watch protocol for the estate, stepped out of the lead vehicle. "Mr. Bennett?" Jenkins asked, his hand resting cautiously near his duty belt as he took in the chaotic scene of vehicles parked haphazardly across the ruined lawn. "Officer Jenkins, thank you for arriving so quickly," I said, my tone strictly professional. I handed him the heavy manila folder. "This contains the original property deed, my state identification, and the finalized closing documents for this entire estate. I legally closed on this property exactly 3 days ago. The individuals currently inside my home have absolutely no legal right to be here. They bypassed my security. They broke in." Jenkins took a moment to review the documents with a practiced, cynical eye. He checked the dates, verified the signatures, and handed the folder back to me with a sharp nod. "Understood, Mr. Bennett. Let us go clear them out." I walked up the front steps of my own home, the gravel crunching aggressively under my expensive dress shoes. I did not bother to knock. I bypassed the smart lock by punching my master passcode into the keypad, pushed the heavy, custom-built oak door wide open, and stepped directly into the grand foyer. The wall of noise hit me instantly. Shouting, obnoxious laughter, and loud pop music blaring from a portable speaker sitting disrespectfully on my antique entryway console table. Liam was standing right by the grand staircase, holding a cheap domestic beer, animatedly telling a story to our uncle. When Liam finally noticed me standing in the doorway, his confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second before his delusion kicked back in. He replaced his shock with a mask of forced, arrogant joviality. He actually spread his arms wide as if welcoming me. "David, you finally made it," Liam shouted over the blaring music. "Mom said she could not get a hold of you all morning. Welcome to the new family compound. Come on in, grab a drink." He took a step forward, intending to pull me into a fake, brotherly hug. I simply stepped back, creating a path, and allowed Officer Jenkins and his partner to walk past me into the bright light of the foyer. The music was suddenly cut off as someone scrambled in a panic to hit the pause button. The silence that fell over the massive room was deafening. 30 pairs of terrified eyes turned away from the champagne and the cake, staring in utter shock at the uniformed police officers. "Evening, folks," Officer Jenkins said loudly, his voice carrying the heavy weight of legal authority. "Who exactly claims ownership of this residence?" Liam immediately puffed out his chest, stepping protectively in front of our parents, playing the role of the brave patriarch. "I do, officer. Well, technically it is a family home. We just bought it. Is there a problem with the noise level? We can turn the music down. We are just having a little celebration." He lied. He stood in my house, looking at a police officer, and lied with the terrifying smoothness of a lifelong con artist. He did not even blink. Jenkins looked at Liam, a look of pure disgust briefly crossing his face, before turning to look at me. "Sir, I have the verified, legal owner of this property standing right beside me, holding the deed, and he states that you are trespassing." Liam let out a loud, highly obnoxious laugh, shaking his head. "David? Own this place? Officer, you have got to be kidding. My little brother is a low-level office drone. He rents a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the city. My parents bought this house for me and my wife. David is clearly just confused or playing a really stupid, inappropriate prank. My mother pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her face twisted in maternal fury. David, what on earth do you think you are doing? Calling the police on your own brother during a family gathering? Stop this embarrassing nonsense right now and tell them to leave. I slowly opened the manila folder. I did not look at my mother. I looked dead into Liam's eyes, watching his false confidence begin to fracture. This is a legally binding property deed, I said, my voice cold, sharp, and echoing ominously off the vaulted ceilings. Filed officially with the county clerk. Paid for entirely by wire transfer from my personal corporate accounts. You have no lease agreement. You have no keys. You forced a side window lock to gain unauthorized entry. In the eyes of the law, that is a felony breaking and entering. Sarah, Liam's wife, marched up to the front, her face burning red with entitled rage. You selfish prick. You have all this hidden money and you kept it from us while we struggle in a tiny townhouse? Family shares. David, your parents explicitly said this is a family asset now. We need the space for the kids. My parents do not own my bank accounts anymore, Sarah, I replied, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. Not since they stole my college fund when I was 20 years old. There is no inheritance for you here. Officer Jenkins stepped aggressively between us, resting his hand on his radio. All right, that is enough. Mr. Bennett has provided unquestionable, verified proof of legal ownership. Every single one of you has exactly 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate these premises, or you will be placed in handcuffs and arrested for criminal trespassing. Absolute chaos erupted. Relatives started murmuring in panic, frantically grabbing their coats, throwing terrified, judgmental glances at my parents. My father turned a deep shade of purple, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are kicking your own flesh and blood out onto the street? Over a pile of bricks? You are dead to me, David. We will get a lawyer. We will sue you for everything. You died to me a very long time ago, Arthur. I shot back, intentionally dropping the title of Dad. He physically flinched as if I had struck him across the face. As the crowd humiliatingly shuffled toward the front door under the watchful eyes of the police, I stood like a stone pillar, watching them leave my sanctuary. Liam passed by me, his shoulder intentionally bumping hard against mine. You are going to regret this, David. I will hire a lawyer tomorrow. I will sue you for half the value of this place. It is family property under verbal agreement. Try it, I whispered, daring him to dig his grave deeper. But as the massive room finally began to clear, my eyes caught movement near the kitchen. I noticed someone frantically trying to slip out through the back patio door, desperately avoiding my gaze. It was my younger cousin, Chloe. I had let Chloe live rent-free on my couch in the city for 2 months last year when she lost her job and was facing eviction. I had fed her. I had trusted her. I stepped quickly into her path, blocking her exit. Going somewhere in a hurry, Chloe? She looked down at the ruined hardwood floor, her face burning with guilt and shame. David, I am so sorry. I swear I just came for the free food. How did Liam know the exact address of this house? I demanded, my voice tight with restrained fury. Nobody knew. My title company is bound by a strict NDA. My corporate office does not leak information. How did he know? Chloe started to cry. Real, ugly, desperate tears. He paid me, David. He gave me $1,000 in cash. When I stayed at your apartment, you left your work laptop open on the kitchen counter. I saw the emails with the luxury realtor. I saw the address and the closing date. I am so sorry. I really needed the money for rent. $1,000. She sold my sanctuary, my ultimate secret, my safe haven, to the wolves for a miserable $1,000. Get out of my house, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. And if you ever come within 50 feet of me, my property or my office ever again, I will have my firm's legal team charge you with wire fraud and corporate espionage for accessing my private devices." She ran out the door, sobbing uncontrollably. I locked the heavy front door behind the last of them, listening to the satisfying click of the deadbolt. I stood entirely alone in the massive, quiet house. There were cake crumbs mashed into my expensive marble counter and muddy footprints tracked all across my floors. The ultimate betrayal was not just that they broke into my home. It was the terrifying realization that they truly, deeply believed they had the divine right to take everything I had built, simply because we shared the same toxic blood. The next morning, the storm made landfall with devastating force. I woke up shivering on a cheap air mattress in the center of the master bedroom, which was currently the only piece of furniture I had managed to set up in the entire house. I reached out and grabbed my phone from the cold floor. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that made my stomach churn. I had 74 unread text messages, 12 frantic voicemails, and dozens of alerts from various social media platforms. My Aunt Clara, who always played the role of the family peacekeeper, had started a massive group chat bombardment at exactly 6 in the morning. "David, how could you humiliate your own brother in front of the police? Have you no shame at all? Your mother cried all night long. You need to apologize and let them move in." My father had left a lengthy voicemail, his voice dripping with venom and false authority. "We are consulting a family lawyer this morning. David, you bought that luxury house using money you supposedly saved while living under our roof all those years ago. In the eyes of the law, that makes it a shared family asset. I demand you hand over the keys, or we will see you in court and take it from you." I deleted the voicemail immediately. The sheer delusion was almost comical, but I knew the severe reputational damage they could cause if left unchecked. Then I opened the Facebook app. Sarah, Liam's wife, had posted a massive, tear-stained essay, complete with a highly manipulated, staged picture of her 3 children looking incredibly sad and destitute outside their cramped townhouse. The dramatic caption read, "Feeling completely heartbroken today. Family should always be about supporting each other through hard times. But when some people get a promotion and a big salary, they hoard their wealth, buy mansions in secret, and kick their own nieces and nephews out into the cold night just to prove a cruel point. Greed is a terrible disease, and my brother-in-law is infected." The post had already garnered hundreds of comments. Friends of the family, old high school classmates who knew nothing of our history, and nosy neighbors, all of them violently dragging my name through the mud. They were calling me a monster, a sociopath, a greedy corporate sellout who abandoned his family. I did not reply to a single comment. I did not try to defend myself in the court of public opinion. Instead, I meticulously took high-resolution screenshots of every single post, every defamatory comment, every text message, and every legal threat. I compiled them all into a secure, encrypted digital file. At exactly 9 in the morning, I drove back into the city. I did not go to my regular office floor. I took the private executive elevator straight to the top floor of the corporate headquarters. I walked directly into the secure, glass-walled conference room where Marcus, my closest friend and the lead corporate attorney for our firm, was already waiting with 2 cups of black coffee and a grim expression. "I saw the Facebook post," Marcus said immediately, sliding a cup toward me. "Your brother is an absolute idiot. But he is a dangerous idiot who is currently trying to build a public smear campaign against a senior executive of this firm." "I don't care about Facebook drama, Marcus," I said, opening my laptop and connecting it to the main screen. "I care about the physical perimeter of the property." The heavy mahogany door to the conference room opened, and Sterling walked in. Sterling was the CEO of our firm, a terrifying, brilliant man who had built his real estate empire from absolute nothing and had zero tolerance for parasites. He respected me deeply because he saw his own ruthless drive reflected in me. "David," Sterling said, taking his seat at the head of the long table, steepling his fingers, "I hear you had a severe pest control problem at the Willowbrook site yesterday." "I did, sir," I replied, maintaining a steady gaze. "My family broke into the primary residence. They are officially claiming a right to the property and threatening a lawsuit for ownership. Sterling chuckled, a dry, cold sound that held absolutely no humor. Fascinating. Tell me, David, do they know that the house they are fighting over merely sits on lot 1 of a 50-acre commercial development owned entirely by this corporation? Do they know that you are the lead project director and hold a 20% equity stake in the entire surrounding valley? No, I smiled, feeling the cold, heavy armor of my reality lock firmly into place. They think I am just a selfish brother who bought a nice vacation home with his salary. My father literally threatened to bring a family lawyer to claim an oral agreement based on childhood support. Marcus laughed out loud, shaking his head in disbelief. A local family lawyer? Going up against our corporate litigation team? That is suicide. We will bury them in so much legal paperwork they will go bankrupt just paying the retainer fees to read it. We secure the perimeter immediately, Sterling ordered, his tone shifting to pure business. Marcus, authorize the corporate security team. I want 24/7 armed patrols at the main gate of the Willowbrook site. If your family steps one single foot on that soil again, they are not just trespassing on a family home. They are actively interfering with a multimillion-dollar corporate asset. We will hit them with commercial damages that will ruin them for generations. I nodded. This was exactly why I had not lost my temper the day before. You do not fight a messy street brawl when you have the power to launch a surgical airstrike. I drove back to the lake house later that afternoon. The corporate security team had already arrived and set up. 2 massive, unmarked black SUVs were parked defensively near the reinforced steel gate, manned by professionals who did not smile. As I pulled my car toward the entrance, I saw a familiar, beat-up sedan idling dangerously on the shoulder of the narrow road. It was my parents' car. My father was angrily pacing back and forth near the gate, screaming and pointing his finger at the stoic security guards. When he saw my car approach, his eyes lit up with fury, and he marched right up to my driver's side window. "What the hell is this, David?" he demanded, slamming his hand violently against the glass. "Armed thugs? Are you completely insane? Give me the gate code right now. We are coming in to discuss this like a family, and we are not leaving until Liam has a set of keys." I slowly rolled the window down exactly 2 inches, just enough to be heard over the wind. "There is absolutely nothing to discuss, Arthur. You are attempting to trespass on a private, highly secured corporate zone." "Corporate zone?" My father sneered, his face red with exertion. "Stop playing these stupid games. Liam is going through a rough patch. He needs this place to secure custody and raise his kids properly. You are single. You do not need all this space. You owe us for raising you, housing you, and feeding you. I've already spoken to a lawyer this morning. Verbal agreements regarding family support are legally binding in this state." I looked at the man who had stood idly by and watched my mother steal the money I had bled for. The man who told me to sell my prized possession to fund my brother's endless greed. The man who thought he could still control me. "Tell your cheap lawyer to bring a very big briefcase," I said softly, the words cutting through the air like a blade, "because he is going to need it to carry the countersuit." I rolled the window up seamlessly. The security guard stepped forward aggressively, physically forcing my father to back away from my vehicle. The heavy steel gates slowly opened, and I drove through, leaving the pathetic storm raging helplessly on the outside. I thought the worst of their desperation was finally over. I thought the display of security would break their resolve. I was so incredibly, dangerously wrong. I honestly and truly believed that the overwhelming security presence at the main gate would be the definitive end of the nightmare. In the rational corporate world that I operate in every single day, when a hostile entity sees that you have heavily fortified your position with armed professionals, surveillance cameras, and infinite capital, they usually run the numbers, realize they are outmatched, cut their financial losses, and strategically retreat. But toxic family dynamics do not operate on the principles of logic, reason, or risk assessment. Family operates on a deeply ingrained, poisonous cocktail of unearned entitlement, emotional manipulation, and a profound, staggering delusion. They do not see legal boundaries or property lines. They only see temporary obstacles keeping them from what they firmly believe is rightfully theirs by the sheer virtue of shared blood. It was a quiet Saturday morning, exactly 4 days after the humiliating police incident where I had forcefully evicted them from my grand foyer. I was sitting in my newly furnished, second-floor home office. The room smelled of fresh paint and expensive leather. I was holding a warm cup of dark roast coffee, looking out the massive, floor-to-ceiling bay windows that offered a stunning panoramic view of the misty lake. I felt a rare moment of profound peace. I was in the middle of reviewing some highly confidential preliminary zoning approvals for the commercial real estate expansion when the perimeter alarm on my desk monitor chimed with a soft, urgent double beep. I set my coffee mug down on a coaster, frowned, and switched my primary monitor to the high-definition front gate security feed. What I saw unfolding on the screen made my jaw physically clench tight enough to grind my teeth. It was not just my father's beat-up, faded silver sedan this time. It was a literal, coordinated caravan of sheer audacity. Liam's oversized, lifted black truck was parked aggressively right up against the heavy steel bars of my corporate gates, the grille of his vehicle practically touching the metal. Immediately behind his obnoxious truck was my parents' sedan. Behind their car was a vehicle I did not recognize, a flashy, incredibly tacky, cherry-red convertible that looked like it belonged to someone desperately trying to project wealth they did not actually possess. And parked horizontally behind that convertible, blocking the entire public access lane, was a massive, rented commercial moving van. Yes, a fully loaded moving van. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and watched the security feed in absolute, stunned silence as Liam, his wife Sarah, my mother Martha, and my father Arthur all piled out of their respective vehicles. They did not look intimidated by the security cameras or the guards. In fact, they looked incredibly, frighteningly confident. My father was wearing an ill-fitting, outdated navy suit that looked like it had not been properly dry-cleaned in a full decade, strutting around like he owned the entire county. Sarah was holding a plastic clipboard, aggressively pointing at the property line and shouting instructions at Liam. But the most interesting, concerning detail of this entire circus was the unknown woman stepping out of the cherry-red convertible. She was dressed in a sharp, aggressively bright yellow pantsuit, holding a bulky, faux-leather briefcase. She had the distinct, overconfident, theatrical swagger of a strip mall lawyer who spends her entire miserable career bullying unrepresented people in small claims court and genuinely thinks she is an invincible legal shark. She was adjusting her oversized sunglasses and barking orders at my parents, who were nodding along like obedient children. I picked up my secure desk phone and dialed the guard shack located directly inside the front gate. "Report the situation immediately," I said simply, keeping my voice completely devoid of the boiling rage building in my chest. "Mr. Bennett," the head of the corporate security detail replied, his voice laced with heavy, professional annoyance. "We have a highly escalated situation at the primary perimeter. Your family has returned in force." They brought an unidentified female claiming to be their retained legal counsel. She is currently waving a thick stack of unfiled papers and demanding that we open the gates under the explicit threat of an immediate, catastrophic lawsuit. Furthermore, they brought a commercial moving van. "Sir, they are actively attempting to establish physical occupancy on the perimeter." I let out a harsh, incredulous breath that fogged the glass of my office window. They were actually trying to establish squatters' rights. They genuinely, foolishly thought that if they could just get their cheap furniture onto the grass inside the gate, the law would magically protect them and force me to let them live there while the courts sorted it out. It was the most pathetic, legally illiterate, desperate strategy one had ever witnessed in my entire career in real estate. "Do not open the gate under any circumstances," I ordered with absolute, chilling authority. "Do not engage them physically unless they attempt to scale or breach the reinforced fence. I am coming down there to handle this personally." I put on my tailored suit jacket, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror to ensure my facial expression was a completely unreadable, stony mask, and walked down the grand staircase. By the time I walked out the front door, traversed the long gravel driveway, and approached the towering steel gates, The situation had escalated into a full-blown neighborhood circus. Liam was actually unloading heavy canvas camping tents from the back of his truck. He was carelessly tossing them onto the grassy shoulder of the public road, right up against my corporate fence line, completely ignoring the fact that he was destroying public landscaping. Sarah was screaming at one of my stoic security guards, pointing her clipboard at his chest and threatening to call the local news stations to expose the corporate cruelty happening to her family. When they collectively saw me walking calmly toward the gate, a cheer of vindictive, sickening triumph went up among them. My father rushed forward, gripping the steel bars with both hands, his face flushed red with exertion and arrogant glee. "It is over, David," my father shouted, his voice cracking with the sheer thrill of perceived victory. "Your stupid little power games are completely over. We brought actual legal representation today. Open this gate right now and let your brother move his family's things into the garage, or we will take every single thing you own in court." I walked up to the gate, intentionally keeping a full 3 feet of distance between myself and the steel bars, radiating a calm that seemed to infuriate them even more. I slowly bypassed my screaming family and looked directly at the woman in the glaring yellow pantsuit. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly flat, projecting my voice just enough to cut through the noise of the wind. She stepped forward confidently, sliding a cheap, flimsy paper business card through the narrow gaps in the steel gate. "I am Evelyn Vance, attorney at law. I officially represent Arthur, Martha, and Liam Bennett in the pressing matter of this disputed family estate. My clients have formally retained me to enforce their absolute legal right to this residential property, which, according to our extensive documentation, was purchased using funds heavily subsidized by their years of providing for your housing, food, and education." I did not even reach out to take the business card. I let it flutter to the dirt, where the wind slowly pushed it into a puddle. "Ms. Vance, are you acutely aware that you are currently aiding, abetting, and encouraging a coordinated attempt to trespass on a secured, private corporate facility?" Evelyn let out a loud, mocking, theatrical laugh, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, please, spare me the intimidation tactics. Do not try to use big corporate buzzwords to scare me, Mr. Bennett. I have personally handled hundreds of messy family disputes and complex inheritance battles. Your father has provided me with a highly detailed, itemized history of your personal finances. You lived rent-free in their family home for 18 years. They paid for your groceries. They sacrificed their own retirement accounts to keep the family afloat. In this specific state, verbal agreements regarding the pooling of family resources for the acquisition of real estate are completely actionable and legally binding. We are officially filing a lawsuit for 50% ownership of this entire property, plus punitive damages for severe emotional distress and unlawful eviction." "Emotional distress?" I repeated slowly, my voice dropping an entire octave, letting the sheer absurdity of the claim hang in the air. "You mean the emotional distress of not being able to steal my hard-earned salary to fund another failed t-shirt business?" Liam violently shoved his way to the front of the gate, gripping the bars like a caged, rabid animal. "You owe us your life, David. Mom and Dad completely drained their life savings for my business, which means you inherently owe them for what they couldn't give you when you were in college. This house is family property. If you don't let me move my furniture in today, Evelyn is going to tie this place up in probate and civil court for the next 10 agonizing years. You won't be able to sell it. You won't be able to enjoy it. We will bleed your bank accounts completely dry in legal fees." My mother stepped up right next to Liam, dabbing her perfectly dry eyes with a crumpled tissue, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to absolute perfection. "Just give your brother the guest house and the garage, David. That is all we are asking. We don't want to fight you in a dirty courtroom. We just want what is fundamentally fair. We are family. We should be sharing your success, not fighting over it." I stood silently and looked at all of them. I looked at the cheap canvas tents Liam was frantically trying to set up on the wet grass. I looked at the massive moving van they had rented with money they probably had to borrow from a predatory payday lender. They were so incredibly confident in their lifelong manipulation tactics. They had relied on weaponized guilt and suffocating family obligation for so many decades that they genuinely, deeply believed it functioned as a legally binding contract in the real world. They thought they had finally backed me into an inescapable corner. They thought they had won. "Ms. Vance," I said slowly, deliberately addressing the arrogant lawyer and entirely ignoring my screaming family. "Since you present yourself as someone so incredibly well-versed in complex real estate law, tell me something. Before you drove out here today, did you actually pull the commercial zoning records and the corporate ownership structure for this specific GPS coordinate? Or did you just lazily look up the simple residential deed I filed 3 days ago?" Evelyn frowned, her arrogant, painted smile slipping just a fraction of an inch as a tiny seed of doubt planted itself in her mind. "I pulled the residential deed, obviously, the one with your specific name on it, which makes it a personal asset directly subject to our family litigation lawsuit." "I see," I replied calmly, casually pulling my encrypted smartphone from my jacket pocket. "Then you are a very terrible, negligent lawyer, and you are about to lose your license to practice law." Before she could open her mouth to scream her indignant objections, a low, incredibly heavy, synchronized rumbling sound echoed down the narrow, tree-lined road. It was a sound you feel in your chest before you actually hear it. It was not the high-pitched wail of police sirens. It was the deep, guttural growl of massive, expensive, high-performance engines. Coming down the narrow lane, systematically blocking the moving van and Evelyn's tacky convertible from the rear, completely cutting off any possible route of escape, was a convoy of 4 massive, fully armored black SUVs. They moved with terrifying, military-like precision, boxing my family's vehicles in completely. The heavy doors of the SUVs opened simultaneously. A dozen large men in immaculate, tailored dark suits stepped out onto the pavement. They were not local minimum-wage security guards. They were the elite, highly paid corporate crisis management and litigation team from my firm. And stepping out of the lead vehicle, looking like a man who was about to casually execute a hostile takeover of a small sovereign country, was Sterling. The CEO of my company had arrived, and he brought the absolute, unyielding wrath of a multi-billion-dollar corporate empire with him. The atmosphere at the front gate changed instantly, violently, and irreversibly. The arrogant, triumphant shouting from my family died instantly in their throats as they slowly turned around to face the impenetrable wall of men in dark suits. Evelyn, the loudmouth strip mall lawyer who just seconds ago thought she held all the cards, visibly took a staggering step backward. Her eyes darted nervously, frantically between the imposing armored SUVs, the silent security personnel, and Sterling's cold, predatory gaze. She recognized real, devastating power when she saw it, and she suddenly realized, with horrifying clarity, that she was entirely out of her depth and swimming with actual leviathans. Sterling walked smoothly and deliberately past the rented moving van, not even bothering to glance at Liam's pathetic, disorganized pile of camping gear scattered on the wet grass. 2 of our top corporate litigators, carrying thick, locked leather briefcases, walked precisely 1 step behind him, their faces completely devoid of any human emotion. I gave a subtle nod to the security guard inside the reinforced booth. The heavy steel gates slowly hummed open. I stepped out onto the public road, crossing the threshold of my property, and stood shoulder to shoulder with Sterling. We formed an unbreakable wall of corporate dominance. "David," Sterling said, his voice calm, deeply resonant, and dripping with absolute, unquestionable authority. "I see the local pest problem has inexplicably multiplied since our last discussion." "It appears so, sir," I replied smoothly, keeping my eyes locked dead onto my father's suddenly pale, trembling face. "They have brought a moving van and what appears to be legal representation to facilitate an illegal occupation." My father desperately tried to muster his rapidly evaporating false bravado. He puffed out his chest, pointed a shaking finger directly at Sterling, and tried to shout, though his voice cracked pathetically. "Who the hell do you think you are? Are you this boy's boss? You need to tell your arrogant employee to hand over the keys to this family property immediately, before my lawyer sues him for everything he is worth and drags your company's name through the mud." Sterling did not even afford my father the basic respect of looking at him. He turned his cold, calculating gaze directly onto Evelyn. "You are the legal counsel representing these individuals?" Sterling asked. His tone was perfectly polite, yet it made the question sound like a terrifying, loaded threat. Evelyn swallowed hard, audibly gulping. She clutched her cheap faux-leather briefcase to her chest like a physical shield. "Why, yes, I am Evelyn Vance. I represent the Bennett family in a civil dispute regarding the ownership and rightful occupation of this residential asset." Sterling did not speak. He simply snapped his fingers once. The lead corporate litigator stepped forward, clicked open the brass locks of his leather briefcase, and pulled out a stack of legally bound documents as thick as a metropolitan phone book. He handed the massive stack directly into Evelyn's shaking hands. "Ms. Vance," Sterling said smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket, "I am Marcus Sterling, Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Vanguard Holdings. What you are currently holding in your hands is the finalized master deed, the approved commercial zoning permits, and the highly confidential corporate equity structure for the Willowbrook Valley Commercial Development Project." Evelyn's hands were actually trembling so violently that the papers rustled loudly in the quiet morning air as she looked down at the first page of the massive document. Her eyes widened in pure, unfiltered horror as she scanned the bold legal text and the corporate seals. "I strongly suggest you read those documents very, very carefully before you dare to speak another word in my presence," Sterling continued, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet calm that commanded complete silence. "Because you, as a supposedly licensed attorney, have made a catastrophic, career-ending error in your due diligence. This house is not a simple, personal residential asset. It is the designated primary on-site management facility for a 50-acre commercial development. The entire valley surrounding this house, including the very road your clients are currently blocking with their rented truck, is private corporate property owned entirely and exclusively by Sterling Vanguard Holdings." My brother Liam let out a high-pitched, nervous, deeply confused laugh. "What is he talking about, David? Stop with the fake legal mumbo-jumbo. It's just a lake house. Mom, tell him to stop playing games." "Shut up, Liam," Evelyn hissed violently, her eyes scanning the documents frantically, flipping through the pages as fast as her shaking fingers would allow. The bright, confident color was rapidly draining from her face, leaving her looking sickly, ghost-pale, and on the verge of physical collapse. "Furthermore," Sterling said, finally turning his piercing gaze to my parents, who physically recoiled from the intensity of his stare, "David Bennett is not merely a mid-level employee. He is the lead project director of this multimillion-dollar development, and he personally holds a 20% equity stake in this specific corporate subsidiary. The residential deed he filed 3 days ago was a mere legal formality required for local tax purposes. By attempting to lay claim to this property, by repeatedly trespassing, and by threatening to tie it up in court, you are not threatening a family member. You are actively, illegally threatening a massive corporate initiative." The silence that followed Sterling's declaration was absolute and deafening. The only sound was the cold wind coming off the lake and the frantic rustle of the heavy papers in Evelyn's trembling hands. My mother's mouth opened and closed repeatedly like a fish suffocating on dry land. She looked at me, then at Sterling, then back at me. The realization was finally, brutally hitting her like a runaway freight train. For 34 agonizing years, they had treated me like a useless wallet, an invisible stepping stone meant only to facilitate Liam's supposed greatness. They truly thought I was just a guy with a decent salary who had saved up for a nice house. They had absolutely no idea that I was sitting on a throne of corporate equity, wielding financial and legal power they could not even begin to comprehend. "Ms. Vance," our lead corporate litigator spoke up for the very first time, his voice sharp, clipped, and utterly unyielding. "Because your clients have repeatedly harassed a senior corporate executive, trespassed on a secure commercial site, and threatened frivolous litigation to extort massive corporate assets, My team has already drafted a comprehensive countersuit. If you and your clients do not withdraw from this property in exactly 60 seconds, Sterling Vanguard Holdings will sue Arthur, Martha, and Liam Bennett for commercial interference, criminal trespassing, and attempted corporate extortion. We will legally seize Liam Bennett's remaining business assets. We will place a massive financial lien on Arthur and Martha Bennett's primary residence. We will bankrupt them, and we will take the house they sleep in. The litigator took one aggressive step closer to Evelyn, towering over her. And as for you, Ms. Vance, if you file one single, solitary piece of paperwork regarding this matter in any court in this state, we will immediately report you to the State Bar Association for gross professional misconduct and participating in extortion. We will bury your pathetic small practice in so many legal injunctions you will be forced to sell your car just to pay the filing fees to defend yourself. Evelyn dropped the plastic clipboard she had been holding under her arm. It hit the pavement with a loud, echoing clatter. She looked at Liam, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. I am officially dropping you as clients. Evelyn practically screamed at my brother, throwing her hands in the air. Right now, consider our legal representation permanently terminated. Do not ever contact my office again. She spun around, practically sprinting on her heels to her red convertible. She threw her heavy briefcase recklessly into the passenger seat, slammed the door, started the engine with a roar, and aggressively navigated around the armored SUVs. She sped away down the lane, leaving my family completely abandoned, utterly humiliated, and entirely defenseless. Liam stood completely frozen on the grass, his mouth hanging open in dumbfounded silence. Sarah looked like she was about to physically vomit. She was clutching her stomach and backing away from Liam. My father's false bravado had completely shattered into a million pieces, leaving behind nothing but a terrified, weak, trembling old man who finally realized he had picked a fight with a god. I stepped forward, looking down at the man who had once demanded I sell the only thing I loved to fund my brother's mortgage. You wanted to use the law against me, Arthur? I asked, my voice echoing with years of suppressed, agonizing anger finally finding its release. You wanted to play the legal game and steal what is mine? Welcome to the major leagues. Now pack up your pathetic camping tents and get off my corporate property before I have the security team physically restrain you and call the sheriff for criminal extortion. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The immediate aftermath of that devastating confrontation at the gates was the most immensely satisfying, pathetic display of cowardice and betrayal I have ever witnessed in my entire life. The very second Evelyn's red convertible disappeared around the bend, the absolute, crushing reality of the situation crashed down upon my parents' shoulders. They were no longer fighting their quiet, compliant, easily manipulated younger son. They were staring directly down the barrel of a multimillion-dollar corporate legal team that had just explicitly, legally threatened to take their home, their retirement, and their freedom. In the blink of an eye, the sacred, unbreakable family loyalty they constantly preached about to control me evaporated into thin air. David, please. My mother suddenly sobbed, taking a desperate step toward me, her hands clasped together in a frantic, pleading motion. Real tears were finally falling down her cheeks. We didn't know. Liam lied to us. He told us he had a legal right to be here. He dragged us into this mess. We would never, ever try to steal from your company. Please don't take our house. Liam whipped his head around so fast I thought his neck would snap, staring at our mother in absolute horrified shock. Mom, what the hell are you doing? You literally told me to fight him for it. You sat at the kitchen table and said he owed me this house. Shut your mouth, Liam! My father roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple again. But this time, his raging fury was not directed at me. It was aimed entirely at his precious golden child. You are a complete fool. You have always been a careless, greedy fool. You almost cost us our only home with your stupid, entitled schemes. We should never have bailed you out." My father quickly turned back to me, attempting a sickeningly sweet, profoundly apologetic smile that looked grotesquely out of place on his terrified face. "David, son, you have to understand the situation. We are just older folks. We don't understand these complex corporate structures and equity stakes. We are so incredibly proud of your massive promotion. We are so proud of the man you have become. Let's just all calm down, go inside, have a cup of hot coffee, and talk about how we can fix this as a family. You don't need to sue your own parents over a misunderstanding." I looked at them with a profound, freezing disgust that settled deep in my bones. The very moment they realized I possessed massive financial power, the moment they realized I possessed the legal capacity to completely destroy their comfortable lives, they instantly, without a second thought, threw their beloved golden child directly under the bus to save their own skin. "Do not ever call me son again," I said, my voice cutting through their pathetic, sniveling apologies like a surgical blade. "And there will be no coffee. You have exactly 30 seconds to move your vehicles out of the corporate access lane, or my security team will physically remove you from the premises and impound the cars." "David, you can't do this to me," Liam yelled, raw desperation and panic bleeding heavily into his voice. "Sarah is furious. She's already threatening a divorce over the debt we took on for that lawyer. If you sue me, I'll lose custody of the kids. I will literally have nothing left." "Then you finally have exactly what you earned in this life, Liam," I replied coldly, feeling absolutely zero sympathy for a man who tried to steal my life's work. "Nothing." I turned my back on them and walked slowly back through the heavy steel gates. I didn't look back as the security guards stepped forward aggressively, heavily resting their hands on their duty belts, loudly ordering them to pack up their garbage and leave. I walked up my driveway listening to the beautiful, chaotic sounds of Liam and my father violently screaming at each other as they frantically shoved the heavy camping gear back into the bed of the truck. The next morning, I did not just sit back in my office and hope they had learned their lesson. I went aggressively on the offensive to ensure they could never touch me again. I sat in Marcus's sleek office at the corporate headquarters, and we systematically filed formal, permanent restraining orders against Arthur, Martha, Liam, and Sarah. We walked into the courthouse and presented the high-definition security footage of the initial break-in, the crystal-clear audio recordings of their extortion threats at the gate, and the sworn, notarized statements from the elite corporate security team regarding their coordinated attempt to establish illegal occupancy on commercial property. The judge took one look at the evidence, shook his head in disgust, and granted the permanent restraining orders immediately, citing a clear, dangerous pattern of harassment, trespassing, and attempted extortion against a corporate officer. The fallout for Liam was absolutely catastrophic. Without my parents' ability or willingness to bail him out financially, they were entirely too terrified of triggering my corporate lawsuit to move a single penny in his direction. Liam's fragile finances completely collapsed. Within 2 agonizing months, Sarah filed for a highly contentious divorce, citing his reckless financial behavior, his delusion, and the massive, hidden credit card debt he had accumulated to pay Evelyn's retainer fee. She took primary custody of the kids, leaving Liam completely isolated, living in a cheap, rented motel room across town, ultimately forced to sell his prized, oversized truck just to pay his aggressive divorce lawyer. My parents tried repeatedly to send me handwritten letters, begging for forgiveness, begging for me to come to Thanksgiving, begging for financial help to cover Liam's mounting legal fees. I returned every single letter unopened, marked forcefully with a red stamp, "Return to sender." The toxic, parasitic empire they had built on my sacrifices had finally burned to ash, and I was the one holding the match. 6 months later, the Willowbrook Valley Commercial Development Project officially broke ground. It was a massive, unprecedented success. The commercial real estate market in the region was booming, and our corporate expansion was entirely fully funded, perfectly on schedule, and drawing immense praise from the board of directors. To celebrate the milestone, and to finally christen the home that had been the epicenter of the storm, I decided to host a proper, lavish housewarming party at my lake house. I did not invite a single blood relative. Not one. Instead, my massive home was filled entirely with the people who had actually supported me, respected me, and stood by me when I was just a struggling kid with nothing but ambition. Marcus was there, laughing loudly and drinking an expensive craft beer on my custom cedar deck. Sterling made a rare, highly appreciated personal appearance, shaking my hand warmly and congratulating me on both the project's success and my flawless execution of the perimeter defense against my family. Elena, my brilliant, tireless assistant who had flawlessly managed my chaotic corporate schedule during the intense family crisis, was chatting amicably with Tom, the observant neighbor who had originally helped me test the security system that started it all. It was a beautiful evening of genuine warmth, mutual respect, and profound, uninterrupted peace. As the sun began to slowly set, painting the calm surface of the lake in brilliant, breathtaking shades of orange and deep purple, my personal encrypted phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I excused myself, stepping away from the loud music and laughter of the party, walking out to the quiet, secluded edge of the upper balcony. I looked down at the glowing caller ID. It was an unknown number, but I instantly recognized the specific area code from my hometown. Against my better judgment, guided by a morbid curiosity, I answered it. "David? Is that you?" It was Aunt Clara, the supposed sweet, gentle family peacekeeper. The one who had aggressively bombarded me with text messages calling me a monster and a sociopath 6 months ago. "What do you want, Clara?" I asked, my voice completely flat, automatically hitting the record button on my phone out of pure, ingrained habit. "David, please don't hang up," she pleaded, her voice trembling violently with manufactured, theatrical distress. "I know things have been terrible. I know the family is broken. Your parents won't even speak to Liam anymore. He's living in a terrible motel. But David, I desperately need your help. My landlord is aggressively raising my rent next month, and I simply can't afford it on my fixed income. You have that massive, beautiful house. You have all that corporate money. Can't you find it in your heart to just let your poor, aging aunt stay in the guest room? Just for a little while until I get back on my feet." I stood in the cool evening air and let out a slow, dark, humorless chuckle. "You want to live in the exact same house you aggressively demanded I hand over to Liam 6 months ago? I was only trying to keep the family peace," Clara cried defensively, pivoting instantly to play the victim. Liam said it would be better for the entire family if he had the space for the kids." "Wait," I interrupted sharply, my eyes narrowing as I stared out at the dark water. "Liam promised you what exactly?" There was a long, terrified, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her ragged breathing. "Clara," I warned, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "tell me the absolute truth right now, or I will hang up this phone and block this number forever." She finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably into the receiver. "Liam promised me that if I helped convince your parents to force you out of the house, he would let me live in the guest house rent-free for the rest of my life. I can't afford a decent nursing home. David, I just wanted a nice, safe place to live. I helped him plan it so I wouldn't end up on the street." The final, sickening piece of the puzzle clicked perfectly into place. The sweet, caring, innocent Aunt Clara was not a peacekeeper at all. She was the hidden architect. She was the one who had intentionally manipulated Liam's endless greed, stoking the fire of his entitlement so she could secretly secure a luxurious, free retirement for herself on my dime. "You are truly incredible, Clara," I said, feeling absolutely zero pity or sympathy for the crying woman on the phone. "You coldly orchestrated the theft of my home, the destruction of my peace, and the manipulation of my parents entirely for your own selfish retirement plan. Listen to me very carefully. You will never, ever step foot on my property. I will not pay a single cent toward your rent. And quite frankly, I will not even attend your funeral when the time comes. You reap exactly what you sow. Do not ever call this number again." I hung up the phone. I permanently blocked the number. I deleted the voicemail. I stood completely alone on the balcony, the cool evening breeze coming off the lake, listening to the joyful sound of laughter and clinking glasses coming from inside my home. My true family. The highly advanced security system on my phone still sends me alerts every now and then, but usually, it is just a stray deer wandering near the fence line. The toxic people who used to terrorize my peace, the parasites who deeply believed my hard work was simply an ATM for their endless failures, are gone forever. I learned the absolute hardest lesson a man can learn in this life. Family is not defined by shared DNA or a common last name. It is defined by shared respect, loyalty, and unconditional support. Some boundaries, once they are drawn in the sand, should never be erased for anyone. And some victories are not just about destroying your enemies, but about finally, permanently standing up for your own self-worth. Thank you for listening to my story. The greatest lesson I took away from this exhausting nightmare is that you absolutely cannot heal in the exact same toxic environment that broke you in the first place. You have to be incredibly willing to walk away from toxic people, even if society constantly tells you that you owe them your life just because they are family. Your success is your own. Your peace is your own. Protect it with everything you have. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, unforgiving line to protect your own peace and sanity? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.